Have you ever had someone in your life just, well, vanish? One day they're there, a part of your life, and the next they're just gone. It's this really strange and honestly painful experience that leaves us with way more questions than answers. So today, we're going to get into the psychology behind why that happens.
I mean, it's a question so many of us have asked ourselves, right? Why do people we know, sometimes people we really care about, suddenly just cut all ties? What is actually going on behind the scenes of this vanishing act? And what's so wild is that a lot of the time, there wasn't a big argument. There was no dramatic fallout to point to. It's just an abrupt and total silence that can feel so cold, so confusing, and yeah, incredibly personal.
But here's an idea. What if our first impressions, our gut reactions to being cut off, are actually missing the bigger picture? Psychology suggests there's often something much, much deeper at play than what we're seeing on the surface.
This right here, this is the heart of what we're talking about. On one side, you've got our go-to assumptions. The person must be cold or arrogant, maybe even unstable. But on the other side, we have the psychological reality, which points to motives like overload, self-protection, and even personal growth. Totally different story.
So let's dive into that first big reason. It doesn't start with malice, not at all. It starts with a mind that has simply had enough, because the brain, just like any other system, absolutely has its limits.
Psychological overload, it's not a conscious choice someone makes. Think of it more like a circuit breaker. It's an instinctual response. When the brain gets overwhelmed by emotional pressure for too long, it hits a tipping point and flips a switch into self-preservation mode. And the number one goal becomes one thing: reduce the stress, right now.
So, what causes this kind of overload? Well, it's usually a slow burn. It's that constant conflict that never seems to get resolved, or a steady drumbeat of criticism. Or maybe it's being the go-to person for everyone else's emotional baggage. Over time, all of that leads to this profound state of mental exhaustion.
And this is such a crucial point. From the outside, when someone just disappears, it looks like this huge, dramatic, even aggressive act. But for the person who's overloaded, creating that distance, it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like they can finally breathe again. It literally feels like relief.
Okay, so beyond being overloaded, sometimes cutting ties is about building these desperately needed protective walls. And this often comes from two really powerful experiences: having your boundaries violated over and over, and the deep pain of betrayal.
A lot of people who suddenly cut ties have actually spent years, sometimes decades, with really weak boundaries. They've just tolerated behavior they never should have. A boundary awakening is that breaking point, that sudden, powerful moment where they realize, I cannot tolerate this for one more second.
And this doesn't just happen out of the blue. It follows a pretty predictable pattern. A long history of ignoring those little red flags, of allowing disrespect time and time again, all leading to a final breaking point. And when that happens, their whole strategy shifts. They stop trying to adjust the situation, and instead, they just decide to remove the source of the problem completely.
And that's exactly why it seems so abrupt to us on the outside. For the person who has been trying to bend and accommodate for years, this feels like the final, decisive action. The slow, gradual approach just didn't work, so now it feels like the only option left is a complete removal.
Now, the other side of this protective coin is betrayal. A deep breach of trust doesn't just hurt you, it can fundamentally rewire how you see relationships. It creates what you could call betrayal sensitivity, where your brain is just on high alert for any sign of future harm. When your trust is broken at that core level, the world can start to feel like a much more dangerous place. Relationships that used to feel safe now seem like they're full of risk, and the brain's natural protective instincts just kick into overdrive. So for someone who has been deeply, deeply betrayed, distance equals safety. It's a defense mechanism, plain and simple. It might look like they're pushing you away, but from their perspective, they're protecting themselves from ever having to feel that same devastating pain again. This brings us to our final set of reasons, and these are really personal. They have to do with what's going on deep inside a person, a story of total exhaustion and sometimes profound transformation. We all know someone like this, right? The person who is the support system for their entire circle. They're the listener, the advisor, the emotional pillar. But carrying everyone else's weight has a cost. It leads straight to emotional burnout, a state of just complete depletion.
And at that point, recovery requires one thing above all else: quiet.
This quote just says it all, doesn't it? It's not that they've stopped caring about other people, it's that they literally have nothing left in the tank to give. The silence they're looking for isn't empty, it's a space where they can finally rest and recharge. And finally, there's this incredibly powerful process of personal growth. Psychologists sometimes call it identity reconstruction. It's when a person goes through such a huge change that they start to redefine who they are at their very core.
And this can be kicked off by all sorts of major life events, some negative, some positive, things like heartbreak, a big failure, trauma, or even just a period of intense personal growth can make someone look around and realize their old life, their old habits, and yeah, even their old relationships just don't fit who they are becoming. And this is really the bittersweet truth of transformation. Growth often requires letting go. In this kind of process, distancing themselves from their past isn't about rejecting people. It's about making space for the new person they're trying to become. So after looking at all of this, from overload and burnout to boundaries and rebirth, we can start to land at a completely new perspective. We can actually move away from our initial painful judgments and get a little closer to understanding. And this right here is the key takeaway. While it feels so incredibly personal, the act of someone cutting you off is rarely born from a place of malice or arrogance. More often than not, it is a desperate and sometimes clumsy act of self-preservation.
And that leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. What if we could reframe this whole experience? What if we could see it not as a personal rejection of us, but as someone's last-ditch effort to rescue themselves from a situation they just don't have the strength to endure anymore? It kind of changes everything, doesn't it?